Thank you very much, Brent. Thank you for agreeing to moderate. And I want to welcome all of the members of the panel. Each person on this panel has distinguished himself or herself on this important issue of nuclear technology. It is absolutely ironic that as you are present here, on the floor of the House of Representatives in about an hour, there is a vote expected on H.R. 5987, which is intended to create and name a new national park after the Manhattan Project. Can't make this stuff up. I didn't make this up for this occasion. But what I'm going to ask you to do, as in the next few seconds, for those of you who are on Twitter, is to tweet to help us defeat H.R. 5987, and to everyone you know, you send a message out that the vote's coming up, and ask people to vote no on the Manhattan Project National Park. I mean, those words don't seem to go together, but they do for this legislation. But I wanted to let you know about it because that's actually why, after I make my presentation and turn it back over to Brent, I'm going to have to go back to my office and try to see if I can get enough votes to defeat this proposition, which is only aimed at glorifying the bomb. We're here today on one of the most important times in the history of nuclear power. As the industry's proponents work hard to create a myth of a nuclear renaissance, the truth is that the industry's outlook has never been more tenuous. The fleet of existing nuclear power plants is aging, and they're approaching or are already past their useful life. Already, 73 plants across the country have received brand new 20-year licenses on their aging plants, but another 33 are in the process or will be applying for 20-year extensions. At the same time, we're starting to find problems with these existing plants. In 2002, many of you are familiar with the story that workers at the Davis-Besse nuclear power plant in northwest Ohio, while doing unrelated work, found a large corroded crater the size of a football in the reactor vessel head next to one of the nozzles. Only 3/16 of an inch of steel remained intact at the bottom. Even that began to bulge and crack. The NRC later found that the plant may have been as close as 60 days from a breach. And if it did, there would have been a major release of radioactivity. It would have jeopardized the immediate and long-term safety of millions of Americans, not to mention the single biggest source of fresh water which exists in the world, namely the Great Lakes. The Government Accountability Office later weighed in on the incident, calling it, quote, the most serious safety issue confronting the nation's commercial nuclear power industry since 3 Mile Island. The Department of Justice said that First Energy, the company that was involved, admitted that they, quote, knowingly made false representations to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission in the course of attempting to persuade the NRC that its Davis-Besse nuclear power station was safe to operate beyond December 31st, 2001. Why would First Energy do this? It's very clear. They put profit before the safety of millions of people. The cratered reactor head was replaced. It too began to fail. First Energy reluctantly agreed to replace it with a new one instead of a slightly used one. To replace the reactor head, they had to cut into the concrete shield building. When they did that, they found cracks in the building, lots of them. As you know, the shield building is the last line of defense in the event of a nuclear reactor meltdown because it prevents radioactivity from being released. It's also supposed to protect the reactor from external missiles, like a plane. So if it's cracked, the plant is vulnerable. We watched First Energy and the NRC's handling of the crack, suspecting they try to minimize the significance of the damage in the building. We found inconsistencies in the stories we were getting from First Energy, the stories the NRC was getting from First Energy, and the stories we were getting from the NRC. Now they're trying to convince us now that the cracks which surround the building are the result of a blizzard in 1978. And that the cracks aren't new or a result of the aging process. So what is First Energy and the NRC's solution to a cracked protective structure? Paint it. And I suggest whitewash as an appropriate cover. I have asked for a full investigation by the NRC Inspector General because the NRC has once again shown itself to be more of a friend than an impartial regulator of the industry. Now, thanks to the pressure that we've been applying, we've heard that the problem with the cracks in the Shield building may not be restricted to Davis-Besse. It may be affecting plants across the nation. If the cracks require repair, it'll be extremely expensive, even cost prohibitive. We need to continue to watch over Davis-Besse and other nuclear power plants to make sure their owners are paying attention to safety rather than profits. And I want to thank my friends at Beyond Nuclear, people like Kevin Camps, who've been doing a wonderful job at citizen oversight over Davis-Besse. Let's hear it for. And what's important to remember is that every individual, every group represented here needs to be mindful in monitoring the various plants around the country within your own neighborhood so that you can share the information and get it out to the public. Now, just last week, an NRC engineer turned whistleblower when he requested an investigation from the Inspector General along the same lines that I'd asked for. He accused, this is an NRC whistleblower, accused the NRC of covering up critical information in a report that exposed how nuclear power plants were vulnerable to flooding. He specifically discussed a plant in South Carolina that lies downstream of a dam. He said the probability of the Davis-Besse Dam catastrophically failing is hundreds of times greater than a 51-foot wall of water hitting Fukushima Daiichi. And like the tsunami in Japan, the man-made tsunami resulting from the failure of the Davis-Besse Dam will, with absolute certainty, if it happens, it would result in the failure of 3 reactor plants along with their containment structures. This is from the NRC whistleblower. It's not a given fact that the Davis-Besse Dam is going to fail in the next 20 years. The engineer has said that. But he added that it is a given that if it does fail, the 3 reactor plants will melt down and release their radionuclides into the environment. Perhaps the biggest problem the nuclear industry has right now is financial. Private investors don't see it as a good investment. And they don't see that plants can't be funded without government help. So nuclear plant owners are turning to the government. These nuclear plant owners, by the way, they're part of that 47%. They're turning to the government to guarantee the private loans if the investment goes bad. And we're talking about tens of billions of dollars here. One plant alone would need a guarantee in the neighborhood of $8 billion. And there's a bipartisan objection to such massive subsidies. I offered an amendment to stop this loan guarantee program with my friend and Republican colleague, Mr. McClintock from California. It was endorsed by many strong environmental organizations as well as some rather conservative organizations. And the coalition is growing, which is an object lesson here. And that is that in order to build the coalitions that we need to bring this issue to a point where it's not only discussed and deliberated but resolved, we need to reach across the political spectrum, because we can find support across the political spectrum. The problems facing nuclear power don't just stop there. Nuclear power is even less viable right now because the alternatives are so much cheaper. Financial analysts specifically cite the price of natural gas as one of the reasons the nuclear industry is struggling. And of course, the horrific meltdowns in Fukushima, which we've heard about earlier, remind us all how vulnerable we are, not just in Japan, but everywhere. And I just want to say that I know that I can speak for everyone in this room to say that our hearts go out to the people of Japan for the catastrophe that you've suffered, for the immediate effects and the long-term effects, which will concern generations of Japanese. And once again, the Japanese people, your suffering is the suffering of the world. And your suffering needs to be understood by the world, because the world has important lessons to learn from the suffering of the Japanese people. And I would ask everyone in this room to honor and salute the presence of our guests from Fukushima, and thank you for your wonderful contribution. The facts are clearly in our favor. Nuclear power should be allowed to fail as an energy source. Unfortunately, facts aren't enough, particularly in this town. We have to change a mindset, and we have to change a game that's rigged. The mindset doesn't get the attention it deserves. I spent several hours on the floor of the House yesterday trying to create the debate, which eventually resulted in stopping this new national park which glorifies the bomb. And the supporters of the bill are prepared to memorialize the Manhattan Project without properly memorializing the unprecedented destruction which it wrought. You can't talk about the technology without talking about its effects. And that schism in our thinking, technology here, effects there, is our mission to challenge and to replace it with integrative thinking, with holistic thinking, with thinking which sees the world and cognizes the world as an undivided whole. There's a sense in which when the atom was split, it really split the consciousness of our country. It really was the beginning of an intensification of dichotomized thinking, of us versus them, whoever they are. And a dichotomy between man and nature. We have to, humanity and nature, we have to reconcile ourselves with the natural world. That's the essence of sustainability. But we also have to be aware of the warning of the philosopher Alfred North Whitehead, who once wrote that the major technological advances in societies are processes that all but destroy the societies in which they occur. There's a thing about not letting our humanity be swept away as we are congratulating ourselves at how clever we are with our inventions. Now, we have to change the way the game is rigged as well. I just want to close with giving you this thought. Thanks to the Citizens United decision, we're now in a country that is closer to $1, one vote, than one person, one vote. The nuclear industry has copious amounts of money to spend to defend their hundreds of billions of dollars of subsidies. Rest assured that as long as they're permitted to do this, they'll spend that money to defend their ability to contribute without limits to elections and candidates. And they wouldn't do it unless it works. It's an investment. So the opportunity to challenge nuclear power is right now. And it's critical that we do it in a way that is based on facts, has numbers on our side, and also looks at the bigger picture about where we're going as a society. And that's why this panel is so important. That's why I am honored to have the chance to share a moment with you and to thank Mike Lenardi and all those who helped to organize this. The panelists will have a lot to say. If I have a chance after the vote on H.R. 5987 to come back here and give you a report, I will. But if you can tweet to help us defeat H.R. 5987, send out a note right now to people, call their members, and ask them to vote against the Manhattan Project National Park. The bomb technology is not a walk in the park. So I want to thank all of you. Keep it up. I look forward to continuing to work with you. I don't need a certificate of election to stay involved. Thank you very much.